Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with me, your host. My name is Chad Medved. This is my podcast. Appreciate yinz being here as usual. Wonderful week ahead of us. We have the second part to a two-part Halloween special with none other than John Schalcosky, the man behind Odd Pittsburgh. So we're excited to listen to the second part. I had a lot of great feedback on the first part, and doesn't surprise me. This guy is a wealth of knowledge, very interesting stories, and it is a fitting conversation to have around Halloween time. Halloween is near. Halloween is nigh. I got some Halloween parties to go to this weekend. Should be a wonderful time. What else is going on in my life? Last night I had a show at Bottle Rocket, Pittsburgh Reads, which is a group of shows that Bottle Rocket has since started, where they ask some people around the city of Pittsburgh to read table reads, or scripts rather. We do a table read of a script. So a few weeks ago we did The Room with Greg Sestero, and then last night we did the 2008 masterpiece of Twilight. So we had a handful of people. I think we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe like 8 or 9 people performing this table read at Bottle Rocket, where we're all sitting there and we just read through the entire Twilight script, and it's definitely as crazy as it sounded. Took a long time. It was fun. I was the character of Charlie Swan, who is the chief and Bella Swan's father. You know, Bella Swan, the main chick in Twilight. And then I was also the biology teacher, Mr. Molina. And, it went well. It was a fun time. You had Rick Seaback narrating. You had Rachel Ann Bouvier. You had all sorts of other people around the city just, playing some funny parts. So that was a great time. But other than that, I'm just getting ready for Halloween time. This is a quick little intro to kind of get us into this second part. If you guys are interested, got some brand new I'll Call You Right Back merchandise. You could order right now, and I will get that out for you ASAP. If you need a spooky shirt around the holiday time, or around the Halloween time. I was going to say holiday, but Halloween time. But other than that, that's all I got for you this week. Not going to talk your ears off. We got some good episodes coming down the pipe. I'm going to have a couple weeks off towards the end of the year. I already know that ahead of time. I got some couple weeks off. I got some stuff that I got to work on. If you want to save the date, December 22nd, me and John, who's in this episode, obviously, me and Odd Pittsburgh are having our 4th show at Bottle Rocket. So if you're not familiar, me and John do this, sort of elevated PowerPoint type of show at Bottle Rocket, where we pick a subject, we create a PowerPoint presentation, and we just give, a little talk to a live audience. We did 2 separate shows, and then we did a Halloween show last year, and then John got sick, which we talk about in this episode. But this year we're doing the Christmas episode. We've had multiple people hit us up and say, why aren't you doing a Christmas episode? Because, we've had a Christmas podcast episode previously a couple years ago, and there's just so many stories around the city that have to do with Christmas time. So December 22nd, a Sunday afternoon, we are going to have a wonderful time at Bottle Rocket talking about all the good things that happen in Pittsburgh's history that revolves around Christmas time. But forget Christmas for now. We're still in the spooky season. If you haven't yet, please patronize your local haunted houses. I've been saying it the last few weeks, but get out there, go to a local haunt. We're spreading ourselves thin this week, me and my wife, because we're trying to hit some haunted houses. We got 2 Halloween parties we got to hit, so it's just going to be a crazy last couple weeks. But we're here for it. We're enjoying it. I'm excited, and that's all I got for you. So enjoy this episode. If you guys enjoy this episode, please leave a comment, like it, subscribe to the channel, all them things. That's simple, cheap, easy, free to you. Just, throw me a subscribe, follow John on all social media. You could find him everywhere, Odd Pittsburgh. You could find me on Instagram and everywhere at I'll Call You Right Back. And, support the guys out here that are doing some cool shit like me and John. It's much appreciated by us. It really is. So thank yous for listening. Thank yous for tuning in to our episodes all the time. And thanks for appreciating the podcast. So without further ado, episode 290, part 2 of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with John Schalcosky of Odd Pittsburgh.
Telephone.
Hello?
Telephone.
I'll call you right back. Call you right back.
Telephone.
I'll Call You Right Back podcast.
Sometime after the 1770s, like Revolutionary War time.
Okay, yeah.
Revolutionary War. And that's a whole other story about things that went on at Fort Pitt during the Revolutionary War. You don't think about that, what happened. The Revolutionary War was like a civil war, where you had your neighbors, just like today, supporting a certain cause. And it became like a very brother against brother type of fight. So it wasn't the British coming on boats. It was the British who lived next door. I mean, everybody was British. So it was just like, did you believe in these new 20-year-olds who were coming to writing around the Constitution? Because they were old in their 20s. It was
That's so crazy to think about that.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Is that real?
It is real.
They were in their 20s when that got...
One of them was like 19. I think James Madison was like 19 or something.
Jesus. I don't know why I've never thought about that until this day. Like whenever you said Chevalier Leonard de Beaujeu was only like in his 30s, like it's so weird because like in my mentality, I still think of myself as like an adolescent, like a little kid learning about things.
Yeah.
Learning about these like adults. And whenever I say adults, it's in quotes
We're
because
twice as old as the people.
Yeah, like that's so crazy to think about that.
It is.
Wow.
Yeah. So that island, prior to Kilbuck getting it or receiving it as a gift, it was the site of some of the craziest, most violent stuff that ever went on in downtown Pittsburgh. Now, it's who knows how much of it's true or not, because a lot of early history was written to try to make you against the Native Americans. Like it was written on purpose, and these words, savages, and things were added in there, or these kind of ghost crazy tales about people whooping in the woods and then coming out at you with tomahawks, were kind of meant a little bit of a racist way to present all Native Americans. Like they were seen as no good at all, and like nothing worth saving. And yet people who were there would tell you that that's a small minority of the people who were attacked. In fact, if one of the Native Americans were to attack a French person or a British person, they would get, responsible for their own tribes and would have to face tribunals sometimes.
Yeah.
Or defend what they did, because it was really an eye for an eye and not so much just a crazy attack. It was, I'm attacking you because you killed my family, or vice versa. It was always a reason for the attack.
Like a retaliation, yeah.
There was occasions where there was just murder.
Yeah.
But most of it was retaliation involved, and kind of like a proper way to go about doing it, But at that island is where they would torture all the prisoners that they would capture in these battles. And not just torture them in just like normal ways. Here's one example of eyewitness account.
What are you reading from right now?
So this is from written by Charles Dollinger in 1908, and it was written about the account by Leland Baldwin, who was a soldier at Fort Pitt during the 1750s.
Is Charles the guy that you said that was the rich guy who...
He's another Pittsburgh historian.
Okay,
another interesting guy. He wrote the 1908 book about Pittsburgh. It's Charles Dollinger.
Okay.
Whereas the other guy, he didn't really write any books about Pittsburgh.
What was his name again?
Darlington.
Darlington. Okay. Yeah.
In fact, the library at Pitt is called the Darlington Family Library.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Because of like not only the books that he collected about Pittsburgh history, but about all of American history. Because he went full on, all of American history. In fact, they have autographs of George Washington, Napoleon, anybody who was around in big time periods during that time period. So this little island is still technically there. It's just underneath the Carnegie Science Center and Heinz Field today. But that area was at one point this place called Smoky Island. And from a 1753 account, when the Delaware and Shawnees were on their warpath with the French, this is when they were after the French, this is prior to the British occupation of Pittsburgh, the prisoners, according to Baldwin, who was there, were ferried over to the Allegheny River to Smoky Island, which was a low sandbar on the north shore directly across from the point. There they were tied to stakes or sapling trees and put to the most fiendish torture that the savages could devise. Coals of fire were heaped about their feet. People burned alive. The women were thrust with red-hot ramrods through their nostrils, and their ears were seared off their bodies with blazing stakes. Afterwards, they would, if they didn't scalp you or murder you right then and there, they would make you run the gauntlet, which was like kind of a line of people on both sides, and you would have to run down the middle, usually tarred and feathered and completely naked, as everyone just took turns beating you and see if you could make it to the end of the path.
Jesus.
So, and this was in full view of the fort, and seeing people screaming and being burned alive over in the North Shore wasn't exactly happy times. So that type of tragic, strange torturedness of whether isolated incidents or multiple times that had occurred there, it's like just to think about all that bad vibes that went on in Allegheny.
Yeah.
And to think, what are the outcomes of that? Was there anything like evidence of that spiritually, in a sense? Is that whole area tainted now because of this dark past? Is it
This is under Heinz Field?
Yeah. Well, it's in that general area.
Yeah.
It's closer to the Science Center than Heinz Field. But what's
so
the story?
crazy.
Yeah, so it's just like these weird little. And then when you start looking into the history of that island, you find out it's a real place. It was a real island. Eventually became the place where all of Pittsburgh dumped their trash. And it became so smelly and disgusting right there. Like, think about it. Like, everyone's trash is piling up on this island. They didn't know what to do with it, so they just throw it in the river. And eventually it became so polluted that it filled in the back gap where the island and the North Shore kind of connected, and it was just filled with so much trash that it just
Connected. Holy shit.
And then eventually they actually did the work to actually connect that whole island to the city. But yeah, like, just to think that
This was in 1779, you said?
1750s.
Or 1750s.
Yeah, and to think that these kind of events were going on there,
Jesus.
and it's just kind of like it's in the air still a little bit.
So this was just like a murder island?
Yes, it was a murder island.
People just took people
Torture
over there
island.
and just just did unspeakable
Worst
things.
of the worst. Yeah, and
For how long did that go on?
at least a decade.
That is, and now was there people living on that island, or was that just a place that they took people and killed them?
I'm pretty sure it was just a place they took people and
Yeah,
killed
like
people.
how big was this island?
It was fairly big. I mean,
Like a pretty big area, right?
You could see it right there.
Yeah.
So you
But like, it's
figure-
hard to conceptualize that compared to like,
Well, like from the Science Center to the parking lot and to like Heinz
Yeah.
Field, so like that general area.
so was there people that like had like a little town on that island, or was that literally
Little encampments, not so much town.
Yeah, so the people that were murdering were over there just like going to sleep real easy and then waking up and doing that work again in the morning.
Yeah. Meanwhile, like at
that's
the fort,
insane.
you could clearly see what's going on. Yeah,
We talked about this at the Halloween show, and but I mean, I don't think a lot of people know about that.
Not many people. I mean, I never, unless you saw an old map of Pittsburgh, you wouldn't even know an island was there.
Yeah,
And then, second of all, like, how would you know what happened there?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's just not a common. That's
Yeah.
so crazy.
in the okay, so now
Was there any number of people that like a general
Unknown.
number?
unknown. Although
Jesus.
it is well documented in some of these other firsthand accounts of when people were returning back to see the remnants of Fort Duquesne. So remember, Fort Duquesne was blown up by the French.
Yeah.
They abandoned it. And the
You said they just left it there as
left
it was.
there burning in ruins. Yeah. In fact, it was still smoldering by the time the British got here. When the British were coming, they talked about what it was like to approach Fort Pitt. And they were left kind of warnings by the Native Americans who were still here. And those warnings were lining the fort around the point on stakes, Vlad the Impaler style. These Scottish Highlanders who were killed at those battles, siege of Fort Pitt and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Their grisly, grinning faces like put on top of stakes with their kilts and stuff laid underneath. That was the report that the British were talking about in their journals, saying like this crazy severed heads lining the point and this violence, just bodies piled up everywhere, just left to, just be laying on the side of the road until someone would find them. In this general area.
Enter.
Yeah. And that was the kind of first impression of Pittsburgh.
That is crazy.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, like that's insane to think about. I don't know. Like, now let me ask you this. Like, do you think like cities like, other cities have the same, sort of historical past like this where there's just like thousands and thousands of dead bodies in a concentrated area?
I know of.
Yeah, I mean, like that's so wild to think about that,
Especially not like a major city.
And I feel like, Pittsburgh is known for being like, zombie capital of the world, things like that. It's known to have some sort of like, horror culture attached to it. But to think about it, to not have this more prevalent in that, like I almost wonder if any of those like, generic tours that you could take down there with the ghost tours, like, they're just talking about like, the stories, like the random shit in like the courthouse. Like they're not talking about like,
I know that's
this stuff.
When I was prepping for this, I thought about that.
Dude,
I thought about like,
you got to,
is there not just that, but like, what ghost story should I tell today? Right.
Yeah.
Do I just tell a story about
let me
somebody
tell you,
like knocking on a table and being like,
this is not what I anticipated you bringing to me today. Like for anyone that's listening, the previous episode we did last year is more of those types of stories where, we're talking about strange, like eerie paranormal type of stuff, but this is scary into a different level that's like even more real.
Yes.
It's like this is
really
real shit compared to like whether or not you believe in ghosts. But like even if you do believe in ghosts, this makes it even more intense because there's just thousands of bodies that were brutally murdered downtown under where the Steelers play and where we've gone to the Science Center, and it's just so crazy for me to think about that.
So when exactly. So when you talk about like what kind of ghost story,
you're gonna be like, fucking up my bike riding experience while I'm like riding around there. I'm gonna start thinking that I'm getting,
Yeah, well, I don't blame you because it's true. In this case, it's true. There's a lot of things we could say, yes, that thing that went bump in the night, it could have been whoever, or some woman in black or some kind of ghost that you see or whatever.
Yeah.
Some very isolated, like...
People don't even think about it like this.
You don't think about it like mass.
Yeah. People that were tortured
casualties.
In the worst way possible.
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
Luckily, they're not forgotten, because now imagine if like you went through all this and then you're forgotten about.
Is PNC Park known to be on top of this area as well?
Not so much PNC Park, but PNC Park is on top of where Martha Grinder, the Pittsburgh's female serial killer from the 1860s. That's where she did all of her stuff. It was right there.
Jeez.
It's 1850s.
I was going to say, you could blame the Pirates' historical losses on, being Native American juju.
Yeah, like it's crazy. Yeah, but think about that. So the last thing that I want to mention about that time period and a fun connection is about this guy who would come to Pittsburgh a little bit later. So he was his name. It's one of the greatest names of like any kind of general in American history, I think. Mad Anthony Wayne.
Mad Anthony Wayne.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Western guy.
Right? So, how do you, think about it. How do you get a nickname like Mad? Right? So, and it is debatable about how he got his nickname Mad. He was a young guy born in Pennsylvania. And he, just like most people in that time period, there was a lot of stuff going on in the world. So if you were the right age of military age, you would just join up and do something. Most people did, even if it was for just a tiny bit of time. And this is after the Revolutionary War we're talking about here. So the Revolutionary War comes out. Like I said before, it was brother against brother. There was no army that existed. There was Continental Army, which is not an army like we think it is today.
Yeah.
These were just random dudes who lived in a neighborhood who were like protect the shoreline from people coming onto shore. And it was like that was the troops of the Revolutionary War. No training involved. There was no requirements for you to like be a soldier. There was no draft or anything
Just
like that.
able-bodied people.
Yeah. So after the war happens, the Revolutionary War, General Mad Anthony Wayne played a pivotal role in some of those battles, including this battle at Stony Point, which was up in New York, where he led a bayonet charge, killing all these British, people that were in this, fort. And he was known to do these kind of crazed bayonet charges where it was like all else failed in the middle of the night. Instead of going in there and shooting, you like 200 people would come in there and just,
Jesus.
yeah. And,
Stab anything that moves.
yeah. And he was, so good at it and so crazy at it that they literally nicknamed him Mad because of those types of, maybe that.
What year is this that he's stabbing all these people in the night?
Well, he lived, to give you some perspective, he lived from 1745. So he was born right during the beginning of this French Indian War stuff. And he died in 1796.
Okay, so he was 50 something whenever
Yeah.
So he's doing all this stabbing when he's 20?
In his 20s.
That's crazy.
He was at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. He was involved in the Northwest Indian War, all these different wars that were going on. So, and he was so good at what he did, even though he was known to be kind of a crazy guy. In fact, some soldiers would try to abandon their post or whatever, or try to go away, and he would have them killed or murdered in front of the rest of the people. So, or tortured. So he was known not to be fucked with. Is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Now, he decided, well, he didn't decide, but he retired after the Revolutionary War, a war hero in some sense. Didn't really stay involved in local government at all. He kind of retired, became a farmer, in fact. And after the Whiskey Rebellion happens here in Western Pennsylvania, so there was like a little mini uprising of citizens here against the tax,
Yeah.
But then there's still problems going on with Native Americans. Now, problems is, I say problems, but I'm not saying there were problems. I'm just saying that at the time they felt that this presence was not a good presence to keep around. And they've had enough with these 30, 40 years now of trying to figure out if they are friends or foes or what to do. It was complicated. I mean, like, what do you do? I mean, it's a complicated time in history.
Yeah.
Well, George Washington had this idea to try to begin to get rid of all of them. And what he called a thing called the Northwestern Indian Wars. This was a kind of the final push to rid North America of all Native American control. And if they could just kill them, that was a plus. And they left this. So, George Washington was like, who could I get that I could be like some guy who could just be like, not care, and could just go in there and really get him? He's like, I know. Mad Anthony Wayne.
Yeah.
So they get him. They tell him, come to Pittsburgh. They built a brand new fort here. So we all know Fort Duquesne and Fort Pitt, but there was lots of forts. There was 5 different forts in Pittsburgh. There was a mini one that sat over by the convention center, Dave Lawrence Convention Center, called Fort Fayette. And this fort was built for this exact purpose. It was built for a place that could start gathering troops for an expedition to literally push all Native American life out of the Ohio Valley. And this was their beginning grounds. But Mad Anthony Wayne knew that just some random guys off the street, or these people who were like soldiers that weren't really soldiers, they were just random volunteers, no training whatsoever. We're not going to win this kind of if we wanted to do this, we need to organize it like from scratch. So he invents or kind of forms the beginnings of what today we would call the United States Army.
Wow.
And at that time, it was called the Legion of the United States.
Really?
And
I didn't know that.
George Washington gave him orders to come here to Pittsburgh, and from Fort Fayette down to where that logs on that old Indian village that's in Ambridge.
Yeah.
they took over that entire encampment and they called it Legionville. And from there was the first stomping grounds and the very first training facility for U.S. military in history.
Wow.
Yeah, and from
That's
there,
crazy.
Yeah,
In Ambridge.
in Ambridge, they had 4 different divisions of soldiers. By the way, in the 3rd division, their uniforms were black and gold, which is
way.
insane. Yeah, I found that out recently, but that was crazy.
What a random little thing.
I know, but they
So what year was this fort built?
Fort Fayette was built in 1792.
Wow.
And through this area is where he decided to, start this expedition to kind of wipe out all Native Americans, which he did.
And this dude did all like the training and everything like that, and like got these people ready.
And it's the beginning of the birth of the United States Army. Like
Wow.
if you go on Wikipedia and type in like history of the United States Army, it will say Pittsburgh, Legionville, Man Anthony Wayne. Yeah, who knew?
You think a lot of people know about that?
No,
That's crazy.
isn't it?
I feel like it's never even.
There is a small plaque there if you go to Legionville.
Well,
and
you got
if you
your
know where to
plaque.
look in the woods, you can find out. Oh, that's where the birth of the American Army started. But
Wow,
that
is it just in the middle of the woods?
It's right across from Sheets on what's that road? High River Boulevard.
Wow,
Yeah. So
I have to look at that next time I'm down
there's
there.
a place down there called Legionville Hollow, which is pretty cool, and it's this big long windy road that kind of goes up through this. I don't know where it connects to up there, but it's you can still drive on it. And
Now, does this correlate with the name, the American Legion?
yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah,
that's
100%.
wow. Never knew where that all came from.
Yeah, definitely Google Legion of the United States, and you'll see it's insane. This like history that you
Damn.
never knew, like no one knows about. But Legionville Hollow is supposed to be like a creepy haunted place in general, and there's been ghost stories for hundreds of years about this place. Not only that, but it was involved with the other group of people that lived down there, the weird religious sect, the Harmonists.
Never even heard of that.
Yeah, Old Economy Village. Over there, it was founded by this guy who it was kind of like a religious sect that came out of Germany and was looking for places to settle, and they settled in Old Economy Village. They were celibate, so the community died out pretty soon after a while, but it was there for a long time, believe it or not. But so they have like kind of this tied history to that area. And then speaking, prior to that Legion being there, then the Native Americans had their village there. That was like the main hub.
Yeah, that's wild.
And I mean, it was huge. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of Native Americans lived in this one small little area, all different sorts of tribes and everything. And it was, and so that Legionville Hollow, which is still kind of like a backcountry road through the middle of the woods today, even holds all these legends of buried gold, of weird seances or strange things you see dance. One report was that there was a big fire someone saw there in the middle of the night. Multiple people saw it with people dancing around it, only like to look back and it's not there. Remnants from some kind of memory of a Native American thing. Yeah.
That's like an account that's documented.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, not only that, but then it's there's
Like what year?
that's in this book. I brought this book with
You just glossed over that like it was nothing.
Yeah, there is a
What book is that?
yeah, I will tell you in a second here. Well, there's another, the tale in this book talks about the General Man Anthony Wayne and a soldier that tried to leave his encampment who was later caught at that Jumaville Glen and tortured in front of his other soldiers, which a lot of people, in fact, he read a psalm from the Bible, Psalm 109.
Before he got tortured?
Which is known as the prayer of the falsely accused. And he said this apparently to his people, and Man Anthony Wayne and the soldiers who were with him felt as if they were cursed because of that, and that whole area was cursed. And it says that...
Jesus.
Yes, it's from the rest of his life. The colonel and other people that were involved in that suffered from extreme forms of diseases, diabetes, continuous thirst, for example.
My goodness.
It goes on and on.
That's crazy.
General Wayne did not escape the curse. Allegedly, he told friends that he would frequently receive nighttime visits from the ghost of this man. The apparition would appear at the foot of his bed and stare silently at him, it says. So, so this book is Forgotten Tales of Pittsburgh by Thomas White. Now, I know Tom White. This book was published in 2010. However, he is he's a archivist at Duquesne University Library. And you've ever seen the movie The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Well, you know, like the weird FBI agent in it?
Yeah.
That is him.
No
Essentially.
fucking way.
He's like the real deal.
Oh, I thought you meant that was actually the guy
not
in the
the
movie.
actor or anything, but that kind of character.
Yeah.
Who like gets involved.
Yeah, way involved.
That's for real. That's who this. He's involved in satanic rituals, witchcraft, you name it, and he happens to be one of the best
He's still alive?
historians in Pittsburgh. Yeah,
How old do you think?
40, 50, under 50.
Oh, wow.
He has a interesting and tragic life to begin with. He had some tragedy happen recently, but he's the guy. He's like the godfather of Odd Pittsburgh. He was like the guy who would come, he would, research these things at Duquesne, find like little newspaper articles and be like, oh, I wonder about the, just like, was there ever a tornado in Pittsburgh or earthquake or whatever? And, or is there a ghost at the county jail? It's just like a small little paragraph. But the cool thing about him is that he's not just making things up.
Yeah, he like uses the history.
Sources it. Like the whole back of the book is nothing but like sources after sources
Now,
after source after
you
source.
opened that up to talk about the seance type thing.
So he talks about Mad Anthony Wayne in here.
Yeah.
And another little thing I had in here, which is a footnote to Mad Anthony Wayne, but I will save that for the last thing I'll talk about this deaths in Pittsburgh. But I have to finish the weird fact about Mad Anthony Wayne.
Yeah.
Now, I do recommend. He's written so many books. I'm in a lot of his books. I'm in the Ghost Roads of Southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm in the book Witches of Pennsylvania. And he's done a lot of books, but like I'm in 3 or 4 of them as like he's interviewed me. Well, that's what he does too. He finds like people like myself and tries to get to the bottom of these interesting ghost stories. And
Wow.
I got involved with him because of North Park. There's a haunted road called Blue Mist Road.
Yeah.
And we found out that there might be some truth to it.
Really?
After it's all said and done, yeah. So like, and that's because I'm talented at finding old newspaper articles where others haven't, or they're just because I can read thousands of pages at a time. Like if I know what I'm looking for, I can really go through a lot of stuff, and that's hard to do. So like, but I was able to prove some of these connections, the stuff that he mentioned,
Wow.
which blew both of our minds. Because it really was like tragic things that happened there at the entrance to this road. But the last thing about Mad Anthony Wayne. Now think about his name, General Mad Anthony Wayne. Do you know anybody else for the last name Wayne?
John Wayne.
Well, is there anybody from a fictional?
Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. Now, do you know any kind of weird? How do you think they might be connected?
Fear
If at
of
all.
bats.
General Mad Anthony Wayne, according to Batman lore and legend, and specifically issue number 183, says that General Mad Anthony Wayne was Bruce Wayne's great-great-grandfather.
No way.
And he is the official mythos of the Wayne family tree.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Isn't it? Yeah. He was the inspiration. Bill Finger and Bob Kane both, admitted that, this inspiration of this General Mad Anthony Wayne and the way that he would go these bayonet charges and the bravery and everything was one of the earliest ancestors of Bruce Wayne.
Damn, that's wild.
Yeah. So that's like the cool connection there.
Wow.
Now, the final thing about how many deaths have occurred in Pittsburgh. Now, it's impossible to know the real answer. Like, what is the total? Tragic deaths. Okay. There's one thing to die in a war, where it's kind of unnecessary death, or not unnecessary. Obviously, there was a perp. I'm not gonna say. That's the worst thing you could say is that you died for no reason.
Yeah.
Everybody had a reason, whether it was whatever your reason was. But later in Pittsburgh history, it wasn't like we were safe from death. And I wanted you to take a wild guess, and that the facts happen to be in this. Even though it's not a story about this fact, but the total numbers, which come from a New York Times article from 1905. Take a wild guess about how many people were killed and died tragically from, specifically we're talking about the steel industry now, okay, in 1905. Just in 1905, how many people in the city of Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County, were either killed or maimed while performing their jobs?
412.
17,700 people.
What? In 1 year?
9,000 of those were just steel mills and iron mills. 4,000 people in 1905 died in shops and factories. Railroads around Pittsburgh claimed the lives of 4,300 people, and the final 400 were either injured or killed in coal mines.
Holy shit.
17,000 workers.
In 1 year.
And the companies blamed their high casualty rates on just careless employees instead of training them or safe environments.
That's
and they said it was
insane.
cheaper enough just to get another person than to
put some time into learning people.
Because there was like that many people desperate for jobs. And
holy shit.
I'll think about all the unnamed, unknown people boiling in steel somewhere down and,
whoa,
wherever. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say like, in 1 year, I was like, I thought you were going to say a way smaller number. That's insane.
Yeah. So like, that's when I saw that too, I thought that same thing. I was like, it's almost impossible to think of, but then when you look into it, it's just as bad.
It's not impossible because if you think about it, like
they used to have signs, at the businesses would be like, how many days without a death? And it would be like 3 hours.
And you think about people like building railroad tracks around the rivers and stuff like that, and
people
like
getting decapitated by trains, run over constantly.
And back then, whenever there wasn't as many like sort of like parameters that employees had to follow, people were probably fucking sauced out of their mind off some Iron City, running in front of trains and everything.
Hell yeah,
that's crazy.
Literally falling into pits, like boiling alive in vats of like molten iron and steel.
I'm pretty sure. My buddy Dylan told me that his great grandfather, that happened to him.
Wow.
He fell in the mill.
Yeah.
And fell and boiled. And I have to ask him after this.
That's crazy. There are plenty of counts of that.
Yeah.
happening.
I'm pretty sure that's what he said though. That's so wild to think about.
Like go out like Terminator 2.
I know.
Like,
thumb up.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty bad stuff. So that was like the first thing I want to talk about was just how much death has occurred in Allegheny County that's definitely unnecessary. 17,000 people.
Yeah.
But it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years of these kind of lost names, spirits roaming around the air of Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Like how many names are known of them 17,000 people? Like that's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. So that
is crazy.
A little weird. So,
jeez.
Yeah. That kind of doesn't nothing to do with what we just talked about, but the next subject that I wanted to talk about and how these things happen. By the way, what started this whole thing of how I was going to talk to you was just a few days ago. I saw that years ago I posted on Pittsburgh an obituary for a guy named Batman. Like his last name was Batman. Like Carl Batman. And he died and he was just a normal guy, just happened to have a weird name.
Yeah.
So then my curiosity all of a sudden starts going. And I say, well, who is this Batman family? Is he, from Pittsburgh? Like it's a weird name to have Batman. And I said, I wonder if there's any kind of Batman connections to Pittsburgh in general. And then I'm like, oh, General Matt Anthony Wayne's related to Bruce Wayne.
You just found out about that? Matt Anthony Wayne?
Week? Yes.
Wow.
So that's what sparked me saying like, well, there's got to be more to this. And then I started digging into all that. So that's how these things happen.
Man, that's
how
cool.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
Cool.
So the next one, how this one happened, was watching Unsolved Mysteries and watching the thing about the Unsolved Mysteries episode. I can't remember from what year. It was in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
It was the episode that kind of sparked the reinterest into UFOs in this general area of Western Pennsylvania with the Kecksburg UFO.
Oh, yeah. Looks like a beehive.
Not going to talk about the Kecksburg UFO.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about, because then, who knows where that path would lead us. We could someday.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about just UFOs in general and what's going on. Is there any truth to this? Rumors of, people in the sky? Just about everyone has seen something in the sky that they can't explain. You, me included. I know probably for sure.
Swear to God, I've told the story on here before.
2 months ago, I saw something flying around. I think it's a drone, but I don't know. Nowadays,
well,
everything's got to be.
I know. So
suspected to be
nowadays
a
it's
drone.
kind of wild to think about that because you never know. You have people that are also trying to fuck with people with drones that have things on there. Mine was whenever I was like 12 or 13. So there was no drones back then.
I saw one also when there was no drones around. It acted similar to a drone in the fact that it had weird, southern flight patterns, I guess.
Real quick. Okay. So I'm
tell me your
curious.
story,
yeah. I want to know yours too, because mine also was like a drone, but there's no way. I was probably 11 years old. We were right up in Mount Pleasant where my fucking cousins live.
Yeah.
And they live on like this big ass farm, like 60 acres. And they just have a farmhouse in the middle. And there's not really much to do up there. They had a big ass concrete driveway. All we would do is skateboard and play hockey on there. Okay. I would go up there for a week at a time, skateboard and play hockey until it was pitch black out. So we're outside skateboarding, trying to stall on this ledge. Okay. And we notice, they have cell phone towers that have like red blinking lights.
Right.
But then we notice one weird red blinking light that is not even blinking. It's just sitting there. Okay. And we're like, you might look at it and like we're going about playing hockey and everything, and then like we all are looking at this like, what the fuck is
What
this?
time of day?
This is night. It's
Okay.
like it's dark out. The only light is the light that's shining on the driveway that we're playing on.
Right, yeah.
And and it's over trees. Like there's a bunch of trees over it, and we're looking at. We're like, what the fuck is this light? They have a telescope. I swear to God on my life that this is true. We run into their house, get their telescope, come and set it up, and go to try to focus it on this light. I swear to you, on everything, my skin has chills right now. Be like immediately fly right up to
Weird.
where you can't see the light anymore.
Yeah.
2 other people saw this.
Wow.
In addition to me. I have chills right now thinking about it. That's the only time I've ever seen any unidentified, any UAV.
Right. Yeah. That's unusual. Mine was very similar, oddly enough.
Very weird.
I was living in Cranberry with my parents at the time, 20 something years ago. And, we returned, I don't know where we were coming from, but we were returning home.
Yeah.
And they lived in Freedom, PA, is specifically, which is like farther down Freedom Road, up in Cranberry. And on top of like this kind of hill. And, we just get out of the car, and I noticed something in the distance, like this weird kind of reddish light just sitting there. And I told my mom, I'm like, do you see that? And we're both like, yeah. Because then it started doing like kind of like a weird thing like this. And I tell my dad, and he's looking at it, and we're all looking at it. And then literally, just like you said, it just went whoop,
Up quick.
Yeah.
And
it was gone.
And it was like it was observing us, because it was as soon as we had the telescope and we were trying to like move it to look at it, gone.
Weird.
I
Yeah.
swear on everything I have no reason to lie about those things.
Right. So, you're right. So, like, that's the interesting thing when it comes to UFO reports and how they're documented.
Yeah.
Is because what might seem real to you, might be a legitimate military exercise. It might be a drone. It could be a balloon. It could be literally something that your mind is just projecting it to be aliens. Because when you don't have a good, clear reference to what you're looking at, why not? It's a normal fallacy for your brain just to fill in the gaps when you can't explain anything. Religion is the best example, because when you can't explain this, therefore it must be God, so you can't explain and that's the thing that pisses me off like no other, man, is that people think for some reason in history, just because people invented cool stuff, complicated archaeological, or interesting things like pyramids, that it couldn't have been done by humans, that it had to have been some influence from like extraterrestrials or like something else, because people hundreds of, 1,000 years ago were just too stupid to build a pyramid.
Yeah.
No, people were just as smart as us.
Yeah.
1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. They might not have had all the facts, they didn't have widespread information. That's the problem. There was no way to like print something off and get it to you if you lived 300 miles away.
Yeah.
So while it was a problem, it's still like, it's kind of like this easy excuse for not trying to find out what the real answer is, or to look into like the real innovations of the people. And it's like discrediting all of what humanity can even do.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Now, is there maybe truths to like, number one, we all do come from star stuff. like the carbon and the only reason why you have iron in our blood is because it came from outer space. There is no natural occurring iron anywhere, in that sense in your blood. It came from meteorites, along with most other stuff, the ingredients for all life. Now what turned it on, that's up for debate.
Yeah.
But you can't deny that certain chemicals and certain aspects of what makes you up is what makes up literally everything in the universe. So every star you see, it's made up of the same stuff.
That's very interesting to think about that.
Right. So now if you go back, 100,000 years or 2 million years to when there was just, hominids, walking around, these people weren't stupid. They were just, there was no reason.
Different.
There was no way for us to find out anything about them. Same thing will be for us in 2 million years. Nobody will have any clue that we've ever did anything.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of,
but whatever period it is, it's people figured out how to survive in that time.
Yeah. We're here, when we do our family tree episode, that's where it gets creepy because like we are those people. Like those people survived, lion attacks or whatever kind of crazy ice age they were living in.
That's the only reason we're
generation after generation. Somehow they
were able to
and you're here now because of that.
It's crazy to think about that. Those are like thoughts that are so valuable about what you do because it's like people just take it for granted. I feel all the time, me especially, my whole entire life up until recently, it's just all been taken for granted. But the interest that I have in all this now is very, very great. And I feel like you're a good catalyst on how to, make the people who are not normally like yourself have a touch of your curiosity to want to learn it. You present it in a way that makes people think about it and that doesn't make it as difficult as going to look at old newspaper clippings in a basement library. You do the work, you curate it in a way that makes it appealing to people.
Thanks. Yeah. It's weird when you look at it. I find it just as weird, but it is truly just about being curious.
Yeah.
And about thinking about, putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to look at it. And that's what we will talk about that last. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Metaphysically.
Metaphysically.
But let's finish the aliens. So I thought it'd be fun to, look in newspapers and look and see, what did people, were there aliens and UFOs visiting Pittsburgh in the 1800s? Yeah, there were articles that talked about weird flying orbs and torches in the sky. Nothing like a flying disc shape that didn't really exist until 1940s.
I've never thought about the fact, often whenever you think of like UFO sightings, you're thinking of like old farmland and stuff like that. But I've never thought about like things like that being from like, that sort of thing from the 1800s and before that.
Well, think about like the 1840s. There was an event that happened in Pittsburgh where a lot of people witnessed a weird flying torch, as they called it, floating through the sky. Now, witnessed by 100 people. Now, what was it? Now, it could be the easy excuse, like I said, was aliens. But what is the real answer? Is there a real answer? Was it just some freak balloon that caught on fire? Was it something, because balloons existed, was it, what was it? So like there's a lot of questions when you start digging into these stories.
You said there was 100 people documented that they've seen it.
No, that's according to the newspapers. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't know if like,
but even if it was half of that, that's still 50 people.
Yeah, I guess the point that always try to make in the newspapers that a lot of people saw it.
Yeah,
so they come up with some random number. But
that's pretty wild, though.
When you have a lot of people witnessing something, that's strange. But is there any kind of talk of like a flying saucers or anything like that? No. So, and that's one thing when you're researching old newspapers. Like if I'm going to do searching for ghosts. Well, they didn't always call ghosts.
Ghouls,
spirits, spooks,
all that.
So if you're searching just for ghosts, you're not going to find everything.
Yeah, you got to use the different terminology.
Searching for aliens and UFOs, there was no such word as UFO until like much, much later, in our pop culture, like 1950s.
So you search for like orb.
Flying saucer, that name didn't even exist prior to 1947. Other than like literal flying saucer. In fact, there's funny articles that you find about people being hit with like plates called flying saucer. This one guy like sued his wife because she hit him with a flying saucer. It's like one of the mentions I saw in the newspaper.
That's funny.
While researching it. And so you do have to search for things like flying orbs, torches or whatever. And you know every time you're searching in there too that you're missing hundreds of possible articles and possible stories. So you try to look for the biggest of the big or the weirdest of the weird. And what you soon find out, which is kind of the most surprising and shocking thing, is that there really wasn't that many reports of aliens or unusual aircrafts in the sky prior to 1947.
Prior to 1947.
You'll find it here and there, once maybe mentioned every 10 years in the newspaper, or even 20 years go by and you might not see anything. Now, I could be searching wrong, but I'm pretty thorough in my weird terminologies.
Now let's ask the question, what happened in 1947?
Right. So I asked myself that question. Is there a way to really find out what was going on? Or is there a way to have a new look at what happened in 1947?
Like, was there a popular comic book that was put out that was about flying saucers that everyone might have seen?
Number one, there was a nuclear stuff going on in the news with Dwight D. Eisenhower at that time.
Okay.
Pretty much put everybody into like a nuclear panic. So that anything you saw flying around was a nuclear bomb, or something from the Russians, or something from some enemy,
an experiment or technology.
Right. So there was this kind of general fear going on.
Huh. That's interesting to think about that too. Okay.
But then early 1947, if you're just searching newspapers.com, and not just Pittsburgh newspapers, but like all newspapers across the country of mentions of a flying saucer or a UFO, it really starts with one guy in Washington State, and I can't remember the guy's name offhand. But he says he sees something like 4 or 5 different floating orbs around Mount Rainier, and they were shaped like saucers, like flying saucers. The best way to describe it, and that his description is why we have the word flying saucers from that incident in early 1947.
Okay,
now this was like, I guess it was March or April, according to the newspapers, when he started seeing these things. Pretty soon after that, there was over 800 additional UFO sightings between then and July of 1947.
Now
800.
But immediately, so immediately this makes me think of like, I'm like, well, why is this coincidental like this? Once you open that floodgate of one person seeing these,
everything in the sky is a flying saucer.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what happened. And it wasn't until like July, the first week of July, when someone said they recovered a piece of a flying saucer in Roswell.
1947?
Yeah, in Roswell.
Okay.
That's when Roswell happens, in July of 1947.
Oh, that's why it happens, because of that.
Prior to July of 1947, that's when you have 800 other appearances in newspapers. Now, 800
all over?
All over.
Yeah.
Now, Pittsburgh's not immune. I mean, like just in June, there was something like 4 different mentions of flying saucers, mainly talking about how people were literally going nuts and just blaming everything on flying saucers. And everybody in America seemingly had UFO fever. And then July 47 happens with Roswell. Everything changes because people think they now have tangible proof of these things. They're not just seeing them everywhere. And then, you go into the whole Roswell case and everything that happened. But soon afterwards, it's just thousands and thousands. Every year, there's thousands of reports of UFOs.
Yeah, chalk it up to that. People see
prior to 1947, none.
That's interesting.
1 or 2, like I said, every 20, 30 years. Which, seemingly seems like could be possible.
Let me ask you this. There's I guess there's a famous account where a husband and wife saw it. I can't remember the name, but it's always one that's like brought up of like one of the first like documented cases.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I can't remember their name for the life of me.
Walter Hill or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Hill or something.
Yeah,
last name, I think. Yeah.
Now, do you have any idea what time that or what year that was?
It had to be the same year,
yeah. That's what I was going to say. So once people start to like see this being documented in newspaper and the news, it's like people start to like think like this is like a thing that happens, and like that's whenever it kind of starts to get kind of weird, because you have some people that obviously just want to feel like they're important, so they probably lie about it, but then it discredits the people that really have seen some wild ass shit.
Yeah, so why I bring that up is because that's exactly what happens, is that if there is something weird happening, or if there really was a legitimate case of some kind of unusual aircraft and no one knows who owned it, whether that's aliens or Russians, there's no way really to filter out all these other accounts.
What's credible and what's bullshit.
So it becomes pretty hard to distinguish what is a real UFO report versus what is just made up for the newspapers because everybody and their neighbor is seeing UFOs.
Yeah.
So how do you find that information out? What's real, what's not real? One way to do that is to go on the FBI's website and look at Project Blue Book, which is the known declassified, partially, UFO official government reports.
Project Blue Book.
Yeah. Now these
You could go online and look at
go
this.
online. You can read every page of Project Blue Book.
There's lots of pages of this?
There's lots of pages of this, and it's not just any pages. These are the actual United States government active reports into UFO claims, stemming till recent days.
Like it's an active thing that they update.
I think Project Blue Book, it's as a project, was done by a certain time period. And
Okay,
they have new different because it was Project Mogul, which was the thing that Roswell apparently was part of, and all these other projects of this and project that.
So Project Blue Book was from what, like 1946 to
Early 1940s until like at least the 80s.
Okay.
And these
that's pretty wild.
are the official Pittsburgh Blue Book UFO reports.
You pulled these out?
Yeah, front page and back page, printed on both sides. Now, they're not all of them. These are just the most unusual ones that I found.
Wow.
And you'll see how the U.S. government took some reports dead seriously. Because
Unclassified. This says unclassified air intelligence information report, unidentified flying objects, Intelligence Division, HQ, MATS, Andrew Air Force Base, Washington, D.C. And then this says date of information, March 1950. Date of report, April 11th, 1950. Prepared by A.G. Love, First Lieutenant of the United States Air Force. Report contains information on 7 alleged sightings of identified flying objects forwarded by various MATS Flight Service Center units. The sightings were all in the U.S. and occurred during March 1950. That is insane.
And it goes on to detail eyewitness accounts by the government themselves, U.S. airline pilots, people who were involved in higher up positions, and the general public. But some of these people are not people that would be just discredited so easily.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
This is insane. This one says Uniontown, PA. April 27th, 1948. To whom it may concern, on this night of June 29th, the night before my birthday, about 11 p.m., I noticed an object in flight that resembles half of a large meat platter. This object appeared in the west end of the city, or the west end of the city, at Oakland Avenue and West Main Street. Seemed to be at a height of about 6,000 feet and sailed on a straight line of about 800 or 900 feet in about 5 to 7 seconds. This object was illuminated. Weather conditions partly cloudy. A neighbor called my attention to this object as she and Mrs. McDonald had saw 2 previous to this one I saw. There was no sound, no rays connected to the object. It was flying north, and then it has blacked out information. This is fucking crazy. These are just online.
Real deal, yeah.
Man, I feel like I'm gonna just
Keep going, yeah. Get a little through them. They're nuts.
That is just insane. This one is
all different sorts of different accounts, different years. Most were, believe it or not, they would go through reasoning and try to find out what it was. And some people would just say, "Oh, it's just a reflection of Venus."
Yeah. So this one is easier to read. This one's like clear. It says April 12th, 1965. Dear Mrs. Redacted, reference letter of 27 April 65 regarding an observation by your daughter. The Air Force regards all reports as sincere. The Air Force has been engaged in investigating many reports of this nature for 18 years and at present have on file more than 9,000 objects or phenomena which the observer could not identify. Only a very small portion has been determined to be hoaxes, unreliable reports, hallucinations, etc. The attached brochure indicates the results results of the Air Force project on this phenomena to date. Since the information regarding your daughter's observation was very insufficient for an evaluation, it is requested that the attached FTD form 164 be filled out by her and returned in the envelope provided. We assure you that her name will be held in confidence, and in no way will she be subject to ridicule or regarded as a kook, in quotation marks. That is insane.
These are official government.
This is from the Major of the United States Air Force in 1965. That is wild.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is when you see where it's coming from, I think it says on one of these documents. Yeah, here's one from the 54th. No, wait, that's from the general. That's from somebody who works at the Pittsburgh airport who saw one. But the another one here is an FAA pilot. Well, the main area here in Pittsburgh, I'm trying to see if there's the address on one of these, but the 9/11th Air Force Base, which is in Moon Township, that was the Air Force Base in Pittsburgh that handled all the Project Blue Base cases.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's got, who knows what they got there? Who knows?
That is
I was
crazy.
actually invited to give a talk there to talk about like the history of, the government in Pittsburgh and just, do one of my unusual talks. And so I did message and I'm like, I'll give you a talk if you can like let me in on some like weird details. So they actually never got back to me.
Man.
Yeah. The law of strange things.
Have you spent a lot of time reading through this?
Yeah, I've read through them all, and the general impression is that there's definitely something.
It's like how could all of these accounts how could not one or two of them be real?
I mean, in my personal opinion, I don't believe there's like people inside of aircrafts like hovering around Pittsburgh, like looking at abducting people. I don't think that is occurring. But are there unusual aircraft and things that are around? Yeah. Are they aliens?
Who knows?
I would have to say prove it.
Yeah.
Now, it's one thing to be fun and guess. And for even if it's like, oh, I love watching all, the UFO shows that are on Discovery Plus or whatever on Hulu or something or Netflix. You got like, who knows how many hundreds of documentaries there are about UFOs. All say the same thing.
Yeah.
Nobody has a shred of proof.
Yeah.
Of actual proof. Eyewitness accounts aren't proof.
I know, that's crazy.
So it's like, there's probably, it's tough to say. There's probably more proof that Santa Claus is real than there is aliens.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you think that the world that we're living in now will be to the coming history that's being written now with like, AI and fake shit?
Yeah.
We have all these phones and we have people that can make fake videos that look so real.
Yeah.
So it's like
can't trust anything.
Yeah, like that's what's so wild to think about. It's like you see shit online all day, every day. You'll see stuff from, it looks like closed caption TV that you're like, yeah, this looks real as hell. That looks like a UFO right there. What could that be? But it also could be some kid that's 15 that's like an editing savant, because I'm not my untrained eye.
About the Loch Ness Monster, that famous photo.
Yeah. Or even the Bigfoot, the famous footage.
That like you do one guy,
in air quotes, the famous footage. Like back then, like that's gospel. Like how could that have been fake?
Right.
But now obviously things are,
it's tricky when it comes to aliens, in particular, because aliens still mean kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Aliens, stranger from a foreign land. This fear of foreigners is what really is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's that since I can't explain it, it must be foreign, even if it's from out of this world. And so there's a little bit to that, and it's a little bit about being afraid of the unknown and not, and then not knowing. I mean, now, granted, that's one aspect. The other aspect is legitimate weird flights that you can't explain.
Yeah.
But there has to be an explanation. It's just that we don't know it.
Yeah.
There could be one reason why. It's because of the government. Could be, but probably not.
Yeah.
It probably is. No one knows what those lights are.
Yeah, I feel like it would be exhausting to, try to I don't know, like try to cover all that up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So is there like a book with all this? Is there like a Project Blue book?
Well, there is, but not specifically talking about Pittsburgh.
No. But I could just buy that and read all those.
Oh yeah.
Man, I feel like
not just the Pittsburgh ones are interesting because they talk about like right here, but there's really good, convincing stories in this Project Blue book.
Yeah, this is so crazy.
9,000 cases the guy says in that one document.
Yeah, like that. That's so wild to think about that. Like, and it's wild that these are just like, you know.
Yeah, there's more. I mean, I printed out just a few of
that
like the
is
best
so
of the
crazy.
best. But there's ones that go on that are like 15 pages long, just to have a single report about like what people saw and what people went through. Which is, but yeah, in general, you know, the whole idea of just aliens is a tricky one. Because a lot of it, I think, is excuses for not, you know, for
just something
when it talks
unknown.
about ancient aliens. I think that's just pure excuses, you know, like where it's like there's zero evidence. So it's like, you know, just because you have a hieroglyphic with a guy with a pointy head doesn't mean it's an alien. You know, could be wearing a funny hat. You know, so it's like there's a lot of ifs. You know,
a good
for
point
the
too.
ancient history.
Yeah, it's almost like a lazy way. It's a lazy excuse. You know, but you know, you
can always come up with things and say like, oh, sure, there was the multiple generations of ancient histories which are lost to time, which no one knows of, like, you know, Graham Hancock type of stuff, you know, or, you know, era. And I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that 100,000 years ago or 500,000 years ago, there were groups of people around doing things that we have no idea about.
I agree too. Yeah, like I understand what you're saying,
but they weren't aliens.
Yeah.
You know, so otherwise we would have some proof, and we have no proof. There's a difference between some, like, give me a severed head of an alien, and then there's none.
What do you think? What do you make of the military, you know, releases of all that stuff?
You know, you know, they're trying their best, just like anybody, to look into see if there is any kind of validity to these claims. And
but I'm talking about like the actual footage. They're like, yeah, this is real footage. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I don't doubt that there's real weird things floating out there, but most likely, as far as they can tell, unless someone can prove otherwise, it's you know, got to be man-made.
Yeah.
And so it's just like some weird experimental. I know a guy who worked at Area 51, believe it or not, and this is legitimate. And his job was to design. He was part of the design team of the stealth bomber. And at the time when he was working there in the 1950s, you know, every other thing. In fact, they would put out things that were misinformation to make you think it was some kind of aliens and not some super secret government, secret plane that couldn't be tracked by radar and stuff like this. So there's a lot of that going on too.
Yeah. The red herring.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy. He's dead now, but when I knew him, he was in his late 80s.
How did you come across this fellow?
One of my friends in California, it was his stepfather.
Very wild.
But he worked for that organization for like 40 something years. It wasn't just he was an Air Force engineer and things like that. But he was telling me like all these early, as much as he didn't go into detail other than about the stealth bomber.
Aliens are wild for sure. It's to think about that is wild because, you know, you think that it's you know, so dumb to think of it as like, you know, little green men and stuff like that. But then you're like, you know, the universe literally just goes on.
Well, that's the other thing I got to back up. Yeah. Do I believe there's aliens exist in general? 100% yes.
Yeah.
You know, is there other, we're not just aliens, but life.
Yeah, life.
Does life exist anywhere else?
That's what I mean.
Of course.
Like, you know? Like how could it not?
Right.
It just does not, it does not even seem fathomable that it could not.
When you have billions of suns.
That's what I mean.
Okay, you know,
it's
yeah.
like,
I mean,
each
one of
go
those
on
suns
forever.
having planets.
And then you could go into a black hole and you go on again forever. And you're like, there got to be something.
A lot of questions, yeah.
Same people doing the same thing somewhere else.
Whether do I think somebody from the universe, you know, which is, you know, you can't even fathom how big it is. Would someone take the time to go to this tiny little speck of dust in the middle of some random solar system to like mess with you and probe you? No, 100% no. Why on earth? And that's the only reason why is because we think we're better than everyone else. We think that, well, of course they must have, you know, our ego gets into it and more so than anything else. Like, of course aliens would visit us. Of course aliens, not other people or whatever. Or
that's interesting too.
You know, it's a weird way to look at it and say like, what is that?
That's interesting. I never thought about that.
Why would they pick you? Like, you go to the beach and like Carl Sagan would go there and you'd be like, you pick up one speck of sand, and a handful of sand. There's more stars in the universe and planets than there is sand on every beach in the world.
Yeah.
There's more stars and planets than sand, specks of sand. What makes you think some alien's going to come to Earth, to Pittsburgh? Like, could it happen? Sure. Most likely won't. So, like, that's the other thing I think about all the time is, like, what gives us the right or the idea to think that we're so important when, we're just, like, literally a speck in the grand scale of things.
That's so interesting because you're like, I feel like I have a similar mindset to you where I listen to everything and I'm open to whatever. And I think about it and I'm open and I'm willing to accept that that's a possibility, but I'm also open and willing to, think of it like you just said, where you're like, yeah, like that doesn't even make sense that they would come right here. And that,
why would it?
Yeah.
So
it's just funny.
You have more going for giants in history and all that other weird stuff, more proof,
absolute proof,
and maybe logistically like could have happened, than you do aliens. So it's weird. Now I might be alone on that, with the fact that I'm not a big believer in the UFOs and aliens in that sense. Do I believe that there's things floating around that you can't explain? Yeah. But like, is it like I'm not arrogant enough to think that little green men from Planet X coming specifically to Pittsburgh? Like, now
that's funny to think of it.
Yeah. Now, so our conversation now is going to lead to personal stories and personal connections to the paranormal and metaphysical stuff. Part of those UFOs is kind of a personal thing. So when I talk about this next thing where there's like the personal haunted stuff that's happened to me, it could just be my mind playing tricks on me. Just the way that you think that you see the thing, a light in the sky, that it must be a UFO and not anything else. Well, it is a UFO because you can't identify it, but that it can't possibly be something else.
Yeah.
That it has to be some otherworldly explanation for these things, where it might not be the truth. When it comes to these other things, and when something happens to you personally, and you have like a personal experience or a personal brush with these ghostly things, it does make it a little different. And I do feel for people who have been abducted by UFOs or felt like they went through an experience, this kind of vivid experience, which they can't explain. And you wake up with these feelings or whatever, I'm like, as I go as far as like, weird implants and stuff, but I'm just saying in general, like people who've experienced stuff that really experienced it, they're not trying to make it up per se.
Like they felt like that they went,
whether it happened or not, they at least in their mind, believe that it happened. Now you go to any psychologist who's put anybody under, for hypnotism and, or any kind of deep, meditation, relax type thing. And you start talking about memories of your past, there's no doubt about it that there people have false memories. People can remember things that never happened to them. It's a weird thing. A lot of it has to do, abuse situations. That happens a lot where there's false memories or just memories of things that you think happened but didn't really happen the way you thought they happened.
Yeah.
But your brain is presenting it to you in a different way. And it's hard to separate the two and to say that there's like things that you're making up, but you're not knowing that you're making it up subconsciously, to how you actually, like the feelings and your experience that you are going through because of these two things. So what I mean by that is like someone, in other words, even though someone might be claim to be abducted and I don't believe them, I do believe that they went through something that is causing them distress. I don't know what that is, until you could prove it, or show some kind of thing. It could be some kind of deep-seated memory or deep-seated feeling or psychosis. A lot of people are crazy. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to be crazy. I'm saying like your brain can't be fully stable 100% of the days, 100% of the time. There's a little bit left over for magic, which is there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, you can't discredit it, but you also can't fully accept it.
Yeah. You acknowledge it.
So what I'm about to tell you are exactly that. Things that I can't deny that happened, but things that I also cannot explain how they happened. And I don't expect you to believe me because, like, why would you? Just like when someone is abducted, like, why would you believe anybody would listen to you, right?
I know.
So I'm going to tell you about a couple things that happened to me this year.
Just this year?
This year, yeah.
Okay.
Which are...
I've never heard these yet.
You've only heard one, but not really that full in depth. And as you may know, only a few people in the world know about this thing that happened to me last summer. And that's where I was invited to explore the childhood home of Andy Warhol. So last summer, I went through this experience, which is too hard and too insane to talk about all the details. But to sum it up, I was either possessed or heavily influenced psychically in my head and in my soul and my entire being by the spirit, possibly, of a young child version of Andy Warhol. Now, I know it sounds crazy, like I was abducted by aliens, but this experience that I went through was so profound. And to this day now, I'm friends with the whole entire Warhol family, and all of his ancestors, every one of his brothers and all their kids and the house. I'm basically part of the family now, which is bizarre because they believe me. I've told them, Andy Warhol's nephews, about this, and it's as if they're talking to their uncle. I've heard it from their own mouths, the things that I was able to find out or know instinctively, without having any kind of prior knowledge, were impossible things. And I've never experienced anything like this before or after. And I don't know if it has to do with the house, or if it has to do with Warhol in particular, or if it has to do with how I approach researching history. Because the more I thought about what I was doing at the time, which was like heavily investing all of my time and energy into researching the history of this home and the history of the Warhol family, and really trying to figure out about this time period where Andy lived in that house. And he left there by the time he was 18. So it was as if an adult version of Warhol didn't even exist in my mind. Like, I could care less about what he did after he left Pittsburgh and went to New York, which is like, that's all everybody cares about. It wasn't about anything to do with his paintings. And it had to do everything with just the feeling of what it was like to be in that house. And, almost like seeing a young Andy behind every corner, peeking and seeing what's going on. I, for some reason, felt like this feeling of his father, which is not written about in history at all. He died in like 1946. There's not really like an interesting character in like the history of Andy Warhol, but for some reason I had like this bizarre, like overwhelming sense of his dad and like the back porch, and then like conversations that occurred in the house. And it wasn't so much as ghosts. It was like literally seeing it and feeling what felt. So like whatever he felt when he was like 12 years old, I felt. And how he saw the world, I saw the world the same way. And it was some way I never ever thought about. I never ever researched the history of Warhol prior to this. I never was interested in him. I like art, but I'm not like a big fan. I didn't know anything about his time period in Pittsburgh. And even though I was doing research into the history of the home, it had nothing to do with his family per se. It was just like about like who owned the home before then, and then who owned it before them, when was it built, like just general stuff. And it was like this experience of the feelings of these kind of like spirits of the house, for some reason literally overtook my entire being, to where it changed my perspective on all of humanity and life, and to where I saw, and I told this to Andy's nephew, Warhol's nephew, on the front porch of that house. for the first time, I was able to see like literally beauty in everything, and that everything was art. Everything was beautiful in a sense.
Yeah.
Vomit was beautiful. Cigarette butts was interesting, just as interesting as the most beautiful Da Vinci painting. Like there was no difference between a scrap of paper and a Rembrandt. And I don't know why, but that happened. And it happened because of that house and because of Warhol somehow. Now, I'm a pretty rational person who looks for evidence. I'm not just like willy-nilly trying to trust my feelings all the time.
Yeah.
And so it confused me a lot because like I was all of a sudden being like sensing these things and not reading about them. And it was like I had this whole impression of like a different side of history that I never bothered to look into or wasn't asking for. And it just like happened. And then I thought about, just how much of my time and effort was spent thinking about Warhol every day. And I used to do that with other people in Pittsburgh's past, like George Westinghouse, and even John Forbes in particular. And one time with John Forbes, when I was researching him, I felt unnaturally drawn towards the point. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to go at least to the Fort Pitt Museum. It's like I just need to be down there at that spot. I don't know why. And I kept reading in more about John Forbes, and I was reading his diaries, which are things like, how often do you read someone's diary from 250 years ago? Like,
yeah,
like for bathroom reading material.
I feel like
July 4th.
Yeah.
So and I get so deep into the psyche of like who these people were.
Yeah.
That you start to almost see them.
Yeah.
And with John Forbes, I get that feeling like I need to go to the point. I go there, I buy a book about John Forbes while I'm there. I go home and I look it up, and it turns out it's the exact date that he died here in Pittsburgh. It was like the day that I was drawn down to the fort.
No shit.
So like,
did that really happen?
It really happened. Yes.
Holy.
Now,
and you had no idea that was the day he died?
No idea.
That's fucking crazy.
That's like a coincidence, right?
Yeah, but still, it's crazy.
Well, yeah. And then you get into that Warhol thing, and you know about it, but not everyone else knows. But there's like 50
coincidental
60
things
different coincidences
that couldn't
impossible coincidences that bring it to a level of supernatural. And I try to seek help for it. I try to find out some guy who was like the world's expert on coincidences called synchronicities. And this guy who writes a weekly article, or not weekly, a monthly article in Psychological Today magazine. That's the guy who I contacted and did his podcast actually. And we talked for like 2 hours about this whole thing and like how to hone in on these synchronicities and what they all mean and what happens. And it's bizarre and weird to figure out. I don't know to this day whether it was like because of just Warhol or was it because of my mindset going in there, but something happened, something big, is the best way to put it. And I can't even put it into words because it's ineffable, But I'll tell you, during that time period, or this kind of, which was last summer, I went through this whole thing, and I went through all these health issues at the same time. Oddly enough, mirroring Warhol's, health issues. But that's getting off from Warhol. What becomes stranger is like what was happening to me as I'm researching these things, almost taking on psychosomatically symptoms of the past. Of these people that I'm researching, like I'm digging too deep to where I'm literally becoming them, in a sense, psychologically and physically. It seems to manifest itself a tiny bit, and that's in this particular instance. It kind of might have been what happened, which led to all my surgeries and led to all my downfall of health, beginning with the weird paralysis of my hands. And I don't know if you remember when that happened.
Yeah.
It happened like twice. And it was to the point where it's called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is extremely rare to begin with, and let alone to have it twice happen in a year. Really, really rare. But literally losing the whole entire power of my upper body, essentially. And here's my other paranormal experience that occurred that I didn't tell you about yet. And I haven't really shared it with anybody. But it was, and this goes beyond the Warhol experience, which is really is a whole nother thing. But I'm just trying to bring that up just to say that just like being abducted by an alien, you either believe me or you don't, you know? And, but this particular thing was happening in my house. And I've seen weird, you know, shadows and just like anybody else, or you have a spooky thing that happens or whatever, you just kind of discredit it. This was totally different. I'm sitting there in this kind of excruciating pain, you know, and this is ongoing, this horrible pain, but especially with my hands and my arms. And I don't know what happened or why it was triggered or whatever, but I got this all of a sudden, like this warm, bizarrely like warm embrace, like a hug, you know, like hard, deep hug. And it was, but it just felt like pure love. And I knew, I don't know why, but for some reason, like it was my grandma Schalcosky, my dad's mother, who I wasn't close to. And for some reason, it just like was an overwhelming feeling and sense of this giant hug from my grandmother, who I didn't even really.
When was this?
This was like in October of last year.
Wow.
And it lasted for, you know, under a minute. And it was the greatest feeling I might have ever had.
Like you noticeably felt like a change,
overwhelming love.
And then it went away.
It was like a hug, and I knew, I don't know why, but I knew it was my grandma, this specific grandma. Wow. It wasn't because I was like asking, who is this? It was just like, hey,
you felt it.
This is my grandma. And then like, wasn't my other grandma who I was close with, wasn't my dad who's dead. Like I even thought about that actually while it was happening. I'm like, well, maybe I could see my dad now, you know, and say hello or something. Like, you know, all these people who I've lost, nobody else came through. There wasn't any like clue to anything. It was just my grandma, Schalcosky, like giving me this giant hug. And it was like overwhelming into the fact, it was like overwhelming. And like I cried, you know, and I couldn't believe what was going on. I felt amazing.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad, scary feeling, but it was like, it was something. Now, and I was going through all that health issues at the time. I don't know if it was like legitimately like my brain playing tricks on me, but then why would it pick like some random?
Yeah, like why would you feel so drawn to that specific person that you said you weren't close with whenever you had another grandma that
I mean,
you
I was
were?
close to her,
but
not like, yeah.
That's crazy.
It was so weird.
That's
so,
cool
like,
though.
I can't explain it. And to this day, I'll never be able to explain that particular experience.
You never felt anything else?
I've never felt anything like that before. I've never felt anything since.
Your kids or anything? You feel anything like that ever?
Nothing. And this is before I was in the hospital. And pretty soon after, in October, I mean, I had like what some consider a mental breakdown or some kind of psychological episode when it came to this Warhol and health issues. Yeah. And I had a near-death experience, essentially.
Yeah, maybe
and it was
your grandmother was like weird. Trying to like, you know, say that you're about to prepare for a fucking battle.
It felt like that. I mean, it felt a little bit like after the fact, looking back and saying like
get ready.
You're going to be okay or something.
But it's going to suck.
But like, I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, that's so wild.
Yeah, but it was. I don't know. It was before I went in for my surgeries is when all that stuff, like the 2 months beforehand, is when all that is when I was like getting real sick.
Yeah.
And I don't know what.
I'm like, you know, I don't know, dude. I'm just open to. I just have an open mindset to whatever.
Well, you know, I'm not one to promote, you know, things like that. You know, I'm the one who goes like, oh yeah, prove it.
That's what I mean. Like, what is the reason for you to even, you know, there's no reason to like make things up. Like, but you know, there's so many people that like, you know, that taint the stories that people hold that are true with like, you know, all the false and the fake ones. And it's, I mean, I don't know. I enjoy learning and not learning, but I enjoy being open to hearing these things and like to those being a reality, whether it be something that you could explain to someone or not. You know, I just there's some people that are just like, that shit ain't real, and you know, I don't know, I was just never that type of person.
Yeah, well, it's the same. Yeah, it's like, I guess unless it happens to you,
Yeah, you don't have a
don't
reason
really
to believe
know.
it, but it's
Yeah,
like
and, like,
there's some people that
I would
that
never
wouldn't-
thought it would something like that would happen to me.
Yeah, you know, like there's people that just don't even think that that's a possibility.
Right.
And then it's like,
It was like out of the blue at 7 p.m. and like a random Tuesday night. It wasn't
no
like,
one was around.
nobody was around. Yeah, I mean, like people were in the house.
Yeah,
but I
but
was
like
by
you
myself.
were just downstairs.
Yeah, I was by myself. Yeah,
I don't know, dude. It's
I
wild.
mean, literally pouring tears. You know, and it was like overwhelming. That it was my grandma, and I don't know why. You know, but that happened.
How old were you when she passed?
13 when my grandpa died, and so maybe like the 20s, I'd say. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, early
because
20s.
it's like, you know, that's like, you know, 20 some years after that. And it's like, you know,
No reason. I mean, if anybody, I thought my dad would come through because like it's my dad.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
and,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
he's even in the house.
but
Like,
that's what's so fascinating about the entire story is that like you said that it's like that's so long, and then you said that you weren't even that close with her. But like, why is it her?
Yeah.
And why did you have that overwhelming feeling of her specifically?
It was, I can't explain it. Man, it felt great. I've never felt any love. Like it was like inside of your, it was like being hugged in your soul.
Yeah.
You know? Like for real. Like I don't believe in souls either. And it's like, that's what it felt like though. You know? So like,
That's a good story, dude.
yeah. So like, that's my connection of like, don't always believe, you know, what you see, but also, you know, you can't discredit personal experiences.
Yeah.
They're as real as anything else.
Yeah.
To me or to the observer. And so that's the question that we're going to leave you with, I guess, is, you know, question everything, but also keep those personal experiences mean something, you know, and especially when you're reading about this history and talking about these things that have happened, like these mass murders that have happened in the past and all these other crazy stories, and to think that you're part of that same connection, you know, you're just living that on, and the least we could do is just acknowledge the past and talk about it, and try to figure it all out together, because it's a lot of stuff that's unexplained. You know, 50% of everything we talk about is basically unexplained, and then the other 50% is explained. You know, like there's like Matt Anthony Wayne, we still don't really know how he got his name. So it's like there's still going to be questions, you know. Same with all the alien stuff. It's going to be questions. There's always going to be what is true and what's real, you know. And then there's things like being visited by the ghost of your grandmother on a random Tuesday night, not expecting anything, or, you know, I wasn't like asking, like, oh, please, spirits, visit me. It was like I'm watching Jeopardy, and the next minute I'm being hugged by my dead grandmother.
Yeah.
It was like that.
That's wild.
You know, yeah. So like it was, you know, something else.
Oh man, this is, you know, it is always a pleasure. Like you know, this podcast and like us meeting through this podcast has like opened my eyes to a whole different level of my curiosity personally. And I you know, I know you do that for the rest of the city, and it's great to have you back. You know, like we all just like, I feel like I could speak for the city whenever I say that, like, you know, we love and appreciate everything you do. You know, I love you. I love that you're back. I love that you're on your feet again. And I can't thank you enough for coming
thanks,
over
man.
and, you know, doing another episode of this. I mean, like every time we do it, it's, you know, we just did 3 hours, 11 minutes. But I know we both have to go out, you know, we both have shit to do the rest of the day. And it's like, you know, to just think about how much powerful stuff that we talked about of all these people's deaths, all this life that has been, you know, brought and taken away right under, you know, the science center and like everywhere surrounding. It's just wild to think that, like, you know, life goes on, and, you know, every day we're like, you know, creating another version of this history, whether it's not as grim as the stuff we just highlighted. But I don't know, dude.
Yeah, history is always happening. You know,
Always happening.
One thing I can leave you with is that history is always happening. It's not like history happened 20 years ago. History happened.
We're living it.
Yeah, I drove up to your house.
Yeah.
That's history.
Yeah,
You
like
know?
this is like we're in
History
it right
is history.
now.
Yeah, we're literally like just then was history, right? So, yeah, it's crazy, but that's a good, you have to think about it like that, I guess, or put a new lens on it or a new outlook, and try to get to the bottom of everything and just keep it and be curious. I mean, like, why wouldn't you be curious?
Why wouldn't you be curious? And hopefully, if anyone, if you guys are all listening to this still, obviously, thank you, but take that from this, crazy tangential conversation is just, be curious because you happen upon wild shit.
Right.
You like how you would have never known about, Matt Anthony or, it's just, it's just crazy. But, this, we'll have to get back together, do a genealogy episode. John has told me wild shit that he said that I can't even, conceptualize about my family history. So we'll do an episode with that. And maybe we'll get an episode going about, that'll touch a little bit more on, what exactly happened on this crazy health journey you had.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, like I said, I love you. I appreciate you being here.
Same, man.
Tell everyone where they could follow your pages.
Yeah, you just Google Odd Pittsburgh and you're going to find me, but,
hard to miss.
Yeah, Twitter,
everyone's following
Instagram,
you already.
Facebook, just follow me.
All right, everyone else that's listening, appreciate yinz as usual. Each and every week, we are back with another great guest doing wonderful things for the city of Pittsburgh. Thank you for listening. Call you right back.